Been a while since it felt like this. Been a while since it felt.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural episode 1 of my show. I am Jesse Sinclair, residential realtor here in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And today is Tuesday, August 15th, 2023. Our special guest today is Jonathan Scooter Clark with Replant.ca Environmental. Jonathan, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Very good, thanks. Very good.
Awesome. All right. Well, I did a bit of research before the show, so but feel free to jump in and correct me if I'm going off track at all. Replant.ca Environmental is a Canadian company practicing silviculture in Canada. Silviculture being the art and science of growing and cultivating forests. And it's been said that humanity owes its existence to 6 inches of topsoil and the fact that it rains. And one of the best ways to preserve and protect topsoil is to plant trees.
Exactly.
John, you're facilitating my 100 tree program for every home that I sell since 2020. And together we planted thousands of trees. And I say together, but Jonathan's done the heavy lifting. And I don't believe I know anybody who's planted more trees than Jonathan. I'm just going to run through a few quick things and then we'll get into it. I don't want to take too much time here. But from my research here, Jonathan has personally planted over 1.3 million trees.
Yes. It's been quite a few years, but yeah, the number grows every year. So 1 million was an exciting milestone for sure. And I'm looking forward to 2 million.
That's amazing. And then you've got personal crews. You've planted over 15 million trees with the personal crews. And then you've overseen projects with tree planting totaling over 141 million trees.
Yes. That number is accurate. As of 3 days ago, we just finished our commercial season. So maybe if you'd like, I can give you a little bit of background on my own history. We've got, I've been doing reforestation work throughout Canada since 1990. So a little over 3 decades. And when I started out, it was a university summer job. And so I was from the East Coast, but we started planting on the West Coast. There's just a job advertised at the university, and I thought, I'll check it out and see what I think of it. And so tough work, very, very tough work. And the conditions were a lot rougher back then. Certainly the industry wasn't as mature or professional as it is today, but I really enjoyed the work despite the challenges. And so I just kept doing it. And so I spend a good portion of each year still in the commercial sector. And so I work for a number of different companies, but typically these days I go out and I act as a camp supervisor, and we have a camp of approximately 70 to 80 employees each summer. And so we start work late April, early May, as soon as the snow's off the mountains. And we generally do about 5, 6, 7 million trees each summer for various clients. And we work all through Western Canada. And then after
6, 7 million trees per season.
Big numbers. Yeah. Sometimes over 100,000 trees a day. And as soon as that season winds down, then we go into the environmental planting projects, which are a bit smaller, but those are our favorites because those are the projects where we're doing trees, building forests that we know are never going to be harvested. That's kind of the underlying mantra with these environmental trees. We want to make sure that we're building forests that will exist in perpetuity, and that's going to be good for the environment and good for all of us in the long term and for our great-grandchildren and whatnot. So
that's what I was going to ask you. Yeah. You do the environmental work. That's what we do with the 100 tree program.
Exactly.
And then, but you do some commercial logging work as well, I guess, reforesting once the trees have been cut down.
Exactly. And we don't do the logging work ourselves. You know, that's not an industry I've ever been interested in being part of. But yet the trees need to be replanted after people log. And as much as we're very much for environmental planting, we also have to acknowledge that Canada's economy is based on a resource economy, and we do need wood products. We do need, papers, toilet paper, everything. There's so much that's based on wood products. So it's kind of critical to today's modern civilization. And the nice thing about using trees is they are renewable. So, at times I wish that there wasn't as much logging in Canada, but we do have to acknowledge it's kind of necessary for today's society. But because of our experience with the replanting after other logging companies go in, that's where we started to get the feeling for, it'd be nice to grow some trees that never will get cut, that there's going to be forests here for thousands of years in the future. And so that's how our whole environmental division was born. And, you say that I do all the heavy lifting, but it still wouldn't be possible without support from people like yourself.
Well, that's, I guess it's a natural part of our economy, like you say, right? And
Exactly.
At least you're keeping things cycling. You're the one who's replanting everything, and then the other companies do what they have to do. But yeah, that is a fact of life. We need wood products. And, And would you say it's more fulfilling with the in one sector versus the other, the environmental versus the commercial?
Yeah, the environmental very much more fulfilling. It feels good. Also, there's some big differences. The commercial sector, it's basically farming, and certainly it's a longer crop cycle. It's probably 80 years for a forest to mature before it's harvested again, and the next one comes around. But for for the commercial side of things, generally they're planting monocultures. That's not great. They're planting just pure pine stands, pure spruce stands, things like that, because it's economically feasible, and they look at it as farming, even though it's a long crop cycle. But for the environmental projects that you're supporting, that we're doing, we're building much more resilient forests. We're building things that are good for mitigating climate change. We're building stuff that's great for recreational, when people want to go in and go through hikes through the forest, and seeing a diverse mixed wood forest. It's great for the wildlife, for habitat. And so with these environmental projects, we never want to do monocultures. We're trying to plant as many different species as possible. So on some sites, we've done as many as 20 different tree species, about half conifers, half deciduous. So we'll plant a couple different types of pine, spruce, fir, hemlock, cedar for the conifers. And then for hardwoods or deciduous species, we've planted white birch, yellow birch, northern red oak, mountain ash, black walnut, white walnut, a whole list. So it's quite exciting to be planting those trees, because we almost never see hardwoods in the commercial side of things, because they're not useful for the pulp and paper economy. They're not useful for the lumber economy. And so, it's really fun building a real forest that we know that people can walk through and feel like they're in a real forest.
Oh, wow, that's cool. Yeah, I could see the monocrops just being, it's all going to look the same. There's no diversity there. And so that is neat to see. I had that on my list. What kind of trees are you planted? So up to 20 different species. That's
exactly, yeah. And one thing that's a little bit challenging is because Canada's nursery network is so focused on the lumber industry, most nurseries only grow conifers. And that's when you're looking at the forest nurseries, the ones that grow millions of tree seedlings in bulk. So you kind of have to go to a small scale, almost a plant nursery, to be able to get some of these hardwoods. And so one of the projects that I would like to do eventually on the East Coast, and we're starting to do some planning, is a few years from now, I'd like to build a small nursery of my own that can grow maybe 50 to 100,000 seedlings a year. And so we'll do just hardwoods there. So we would do the birches, we would do oaks and ash trees and things like that. So, it's kind of a weakness in the supply chain. But at the same time, a lot of people throughout Canada, both the public, the industry side, the nursery side, just about everyone is starting to recognize the fact that trees really are good for Canada, and that we can't have Canadian forests that are pure monocultures. And so there's a lot of interest from different groups that are interested in trying to expand the availability of supply, I guess, for the hardwoods. For example, there's a group in New Brunswick associated with the Provincial Parks Association. We've done some park sites for them, and they've become fascinated with the work that we're doing. And so they're at the point now of designing basically the same idea that I had, just a small greenhouse that could do maybe 50 to 100,000 trees a year. They want to do the same thing in one of their provincial parks, to have it as a site where park visitors can come in and see how the whole process works, how seedlings are grown, they'd have some demonstrations, how the seed is collected, and then how it's grown. And then the trees that they grow each year could be used within the provincial parks. So it's kind of exciting that some of the ideas that we've had are actually pushing on and kind of reverberating through the public.
We're great for the kids to see and learn about.
Exactly. So we do a couple different types of projects. We have a few sites that are purely carbon capture. And so on those sites, we've basically got a block in the woods, which we've started to grow a forest, and we're just going to protect that so that it's never logged. And it's not really going to be a destination forest. But then we have other sites which are similar, but which we want to turn into demonstration forests. So we're going to build some trails to them. We've already started some of them. And, you can imagine maybe getting 50 or 60 little printed signs with species name and a QR code that we could put on stakes beside certain trees. And so maybe a classroom comes in, they come up to a certain tree, and the kids with their mobile phones can click on the QR code. It takes them to a link that describes the tree, tells about the species, tells what's good about it, what wildlife use the tree, that sort of thing. And, those demonstration forests, I think, will be great for classroom visits or for just the general public. And then on top of those two types of sites, we also have our parks. And that's basically just municipal parks, provincial parks, and national parks. And so most parks in Canada do not allow any logging. And so there are a few that are an exception where they harvest and it funds the budget for the park, but we stay out of those ones. So the parks that we've worked in, the trees will be there permanently. And so we've done things like, there's a few cases where hurricanes have hit a park and knocked down a lot of trees and damaged the forest. So we'll go in and put in more trees to rebuild the forest more quickly. There's other places where, especially in some of the provincial parks, there's a recognition that they don't need so many grassy fields. They don't need quite as much picnic area. There's underutilized areas, and they want to turn those back into real forests, mixed wood forests. And
okay, yeah, I was going to ask you, how did they come to be without trees that you need to
exactly
there, I guess?
Yeah, a few decades ago, people got a little bit overexcited about clearing land in the provincial parks, in some of them. And so, it doesn't need to have as much open field. Some of these areas will benefit from more forest. And it benefits for a lot of reasons, because first of all, it's better for the climate. Obviously, more trees helping to convert carbon dioxide to oxygen, photosynthesis, all that sort of stuff, carbon capture, that's all good. On a completely opposite note, that they're also worried about their lawn mowing budgets. Everyone's worried about budgeting these days, as always. And the provincial parks spend a lot of money on mowing lawns, and some of it's unnecessary. And it's also burning fossil fuels to run the lawnmowers. So in some areas, they think, well, maybe we need to be mowing less lawn and building more forests. And you mentioned a really good key point earlier. You said the 6 inches of topsoil. So many people don't understand that or don't think about it. And a lot of the carbon that's captured in a forest, it's not just in the trees. The trees might account for at most 25, 30% of the carbon in a lot of forests. But there's all that biomass, well, some from vegetation and brush, but there's so much biomass as leaves fall, they end up on the forest floor, they start to decompose, and then you get that thick layer of organics on top of the mineral soil. And so there's a lot of carbon storage in those areas. And so that's one more way that a forest can really help with climate change mitigation.
Fascinating. I guess it absorbs a lot of water that way too. The soil can absorb and hold a lot more water.
Absolutely. Yep. And of course, that's good for the future. You get a dry, barren field, and it's going to struggle. But once it starts getting that upper layer, it starts with brush, and then trees start to grow. But once it starts getting some shade and some leaves or needles falling, then starts building up that organic. That's kind of a self-fulfilling process. So we like to kickstart a lot of those areas. A lot of fields, sure, leave them for 100 years or 150 years. They will come back to forest eventually. But, if we can start that process in the space of a few weeks with planting seedlings, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, that reminds me of the quote from your website. I'm going to say it now. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. So that makes sense to get out there and jumpstart the forests. Exactly. And get them going, give them a head start.
Yeah.
So I'm going to toot your horn a little bit here, buddy. You're pretty modest, and I know we haven't actually connected. This is the first time we've seen each other on a Zoom call before. We've called and over the years, so the last few years, and emailed, but it's nice to put a face to the voice at the other end of the phone. And so you're Jonathan Scooter Clark, is a published author on various topics: forestry, history, travel. You've got a commerce degree, an MBA. You moonlight as a DJ and a bartender in Eastern Canada in your downtime. And then you're studying to become a pilot as well. Is that all correct? You got time for all that stuff?
Well, I haven't actually. I've cut back on the bartending. I haven't done any bar shifts since COVID 3 years ago. So when things started to shut down, that was the end of that. And since then, I've been just so busy with all the environmental replanting and the commercial work on this side.
That's what I was thinking. How do you find time? How does this guy find time for all this stuff here?
Well, I had a day off on Christmas. I had a day off on Christmas Day this year. Yeah,
the phone doesn't seem to ring on Christmas unless it's family or friends, right?
No, exactly. No, it's a nonstop. I mean, it's kind of funny. Some people think that we're planting trees all year, and then all of a sudden they think, wait a minute, it's Canada. You have snow. How do you plant trees in the snow? And they're absolutely right. You can't plant trees when there's snow on the ground. But the planting process is it's year round. A lot of the nursery stock, we have to start thinking about seed supply procurement for the nurseries about 18 months before the seedlings start going into the ground. So there's the seed collection, seed sorting, cleaning, drying. Then in the spring, they start sowing trees. And so quite often March and April is when the majority of the trees get sown at the nurseries. Depending on the species, most of them can be grown within 4 or 5 months. And so for the trees sown in April, often we can start planting those in September. But depending what part of Canada we're in, a lot of places don't do planting in the fall. The East Coast is a very moderate climate, very moisture prone in the fall. And so we have fall planting on the East Coast, and it's very, very successful from Quebec right out to Newfoundland. On the West Coast, BC and Alberta especially, it gets pretty dry in the fall. The ground gets really hard packed, dry, and there tends to be a lot more seedling mortality when we do try to plant. So most of the planting on the West Coast happens from the end of April until, say, the second week of August. And so if trees are grown and they're only available for planting in September, yet you need them in the spring, obviously those trees have to be packaged, overwintered, and then they'll start getting planted the next year in April. So it's a big planning process, certainly, usually about 18 months lead time. For a small project, if the nurseries have extra stock available in September, then sometimes we can pull together a small project at the last minute. But generally, we try to plan things between 6 to 12 months out at least. sometimes 18 months out.
I didn't think about all the planning that goes into that, but yeah, you would have to have your supply chain all planned out and in order to meet your requirements, the plan.
You know, and it's a lot of logistics. For example, on the commercial side, it's bigger. So I've got 70, 80 people. A lot of them are young people, in their 20s, university students sometimes, summer jobs for them. A lot of people that are not university, they just have different unique life experiences from all sorts of backgrounds all over Canada, and just trying to coordinate the logistics of having them all converge in one area at the start of April, and then start fanning out. And then we have to plan all the different sites. So I was saying earlier, this week, I was in Alberta yesterday, British Columbia today, flying to Nova Scotia tomorrow, New Brunswick on Thursday, and then over to Newfoundland on Friday. But, that kind of planning, you have to think about that quite a few months in advance just to make sure it all lines up and whatnot. So it's tricky, but, it's worth it in the end. It's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So generally speaking, would you start with the weather and the climate in Canada? Would you start west and work your way east?
Exactly.
Season?
Yeah. So for quite a few years, I did planting on Vancouver Island also. And so the climate there, because the ocean is so close, it's actually possible to start planting in late February, usually. That would be at the low elevations, very close to the beaches, very close to the water. Once you get up to maybe 600 meters and above, there's still a lot of snow in the spring. But we'd start at the water in late February, mid-February to late February. We'd work our way up the slopes. And then middle of April, we would move to the interior, to British Columbia, or Alberta. Mid-May starts to open up, the snow melts. And so we just work through our commercial season until the start of August, and then move over to the East Coast. And the East Coast, you can also plant in the spring and summer. And there are some crews that stay there all year, but there's certainly a migration of West Coast people to the East Coast, starting mid-August. And it's fascinating. A lot of professional tree planters do jump around quite a bit to different parts of Canada. So, and it's good. It's, take advantage of the skills of the workforce.
So you would get to see a lot of Canada then if you're a tree planter, you're traveling all over the place.
Definitely. And quite often the scenery is not very exciting. Quite often we're on cut blocks, but sometimes, especially when we work, my crews are they're always excited for June, because June is typically our southern Alberta work. And so we're working around Sundre, around Cochrane, around Longview, Bright Creek, McLean Creek, all those areas. And there's some pretty beautiful mountains in the background in some of our areas that we work. So they love that part of the season for sure.
Get some scenery to look at while you're out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Those trees. Cool. So you covered a lot of that stuff. Let's see here. So you talked about where you go and how the season looks, but what would a typical day look like as a tree planter? Like, you wake up, what do you do from start to finish in a day?
Okay, so on the commercial side, a little different depending which side we're on, but on the commercial side, normally the day would start at probably about 3:15 for the kitchen staff. So they have to get up, start getting breakfast ready. For myself, I usually get up at roughly the same time, and that gives me a couple of hours of quiet before the planters start waking up. And so I can catch up on some office work during that window. And then 5:30, breakfast begins for the planters, and that goes until 6:30. And then 6:45, the trucks roll out of camp. And so we tend to be in mobile bush camps, so everyone's living in tents. And we tend to work in one area for 2 to 4 weeks at a time. And then we move to the next area as we kind of crisscross through the regions that we have to plant. So anyway, 6:45 in the morning, trucks roll out. The crews disperse out to the different planting blocks. They have to make sure they have the right types of trees, the right species, the right request keys. A lot of a lot of the seed, we have to be careful that we're planting it in the same elevation range and in the same general latitude and longitude. So you can't really just pick seed from, say, Cochrane and plant it in northern BC. It's just not going to grow as well. So they tend to pick the seed for any specific project from the very area where the trees are going to be grown in. And exactly.
Okay. Yeah, that makes
So we make sure we grab the right trees for the day's blocks, load those into the trucks, go out, spend the day planting, back to dinner 5:30. The planters get to relax for a couple hours, and the camp is pretty quiet by 8 at night. Everyone goes to bed pretty early because obviously they're pretty tired. A lot of
the price if they're up late the night before.
Exactly. And a lot of them are burning, 7,000-8,000 calories a day. It's very, very intensive physical labor. So it's tough. So they appreciate their sleep.
So that the breakfast must be enormous then for everybody to get enough calories in.
Exactly.
That's what you're burning there.
And of course we have a lunch table. They get to make their own lunches. So you'll see planters with, 8-10 sandwiches for the day and a bag of fruit, just to keep them going throughout the day. And, a dinner plate, some of them use actual trays, cafeteria trays for a dinner plate. It's amazing how much they can eat. So
sleep like a baby after that day of work then.
Exactly. And it's not quite as fancy on the other side of the country because we don't have a full camp. On the East Coast, we're either staying in rented houses, Airbnbs, places like that. So we don't have a full-time cook in those locations, and the planters cook for themselves.
Gotcha. So I got to ask you, the nickname Scooter, what's the story there?
That's from university, and I'm sure as you were growing up, you watched The Muppets. Apparently, there's a character on The Muppets named Scooter that kind of ran around and did errands and helped Kermit out. And so when we were in university residence the first day, they picked nicknames for everyone, and somehow I got that one. And, it stuck.
You got Scooter, and it's here to this day.
Yep.
So could I call you Scooter?
Absolutely. Yep. Most people do. It's funny. A lot of people assume my name must be Scott because of that, but it's not. It's just from The Muppets.
Right on. So now we know what you're doing presently, but what's next for you? Like it looks like you're doing electronic dance music production, and you're working on this pilot license. So where do you see yourself going in the next few years here?
Well, I definitely enjoy the planting. It's hard to become a planter once you're into your 30s. Your body just doesn't seem to enjoy it because of the physical exertion. But if you start when you're young, in your 20s, like I did, it seems that your body kind of, there's muscle memory. Your body learns how to do it efficiently without too much stress on the body. And so a lot of people that start in their 20s can plant right up until their 60s sometimes. And so, I don't know, I enjoy the industry, so I could see myself doing this for quite a while longer, I hope. And certainly with a Replant Environmental, at some point I'm going to want to hand it off to a group of people to make sure that is operating for decades to come too. So right now we're planting the seed, if you'll pardon the pun.
I love the puns, so bring them on. So you want to continue that? Obviously, that makes sense. Now, before we go here, how would people connect with you if somebody wants to start doing the tree planting program with you or order the books you have available online? What would be the best way for people to reach out and connect with you?
Well, I think if you visit the website, that should give you all the contact info and all the links that you would need. So that's
www.replant.ca. Replant.ca is the best way.
And to be honest, we've got two websites. Replant.ca is more focused on the commercial side of things. But if you look up into the top right, when you log into the site on a desktop, you'll see a link for the environmental division. And that takes you to the separate website for the environmental projects. And that's the interesting one. So you can look at projects that we're doing. We've got tons and tons of photos there. That's probably your best bet. Replant.ca. click on the environmental link and just go from there. And we've got an Instagram account that's fairly popular. Lots of photos there. So,
and if you know from the website, so okay.
Yeah. And if anyone needed to reach me directly, you can email me, Scooter, SCOOTER @Replant.ca.
All right. Well, I'll be encouraging my colleagues and any other business owners that I know to get involved. I feel very passionate about what you're doing, and I'm thankful that we connected and got this program going. I know it's thousands of trees that we've done together, but it's nice to know that you're up into the multiple millions with your crews, and that's really making a huge difference here in Canada. It's great.
Yeah. Every person, we've got small sponsors, we've got big sponsors. Every tree helps. Absolutely. Doesn't matter how big or how small. So,
well, I'm excited to hear how your journey goes, and maybe we can check back in at another point here and see.
Awesome.
Update at that time.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time.
All right. Thank you. I know you're a busy guy. Where are you off to next? What's the next stop? You said you're heading east, was it?
Yeah. Tomorrow's a flight to Nova Scotia. Yep.
Flight to Nova Scotia.
And some planning and some, we've done quite a few park sites in Nova Scotia in the last few years. So I'm doing some, most of them not tomorrow, but over the next week and a half, I have to do survival surveys. We generally have very good survival. That's one question a lot of people have. By planting the right tree at the right time of year in the right spots, generally our survival is well over 95%. Sometimes over 98, 99%. Yep.
So that's incredible. That's a good stat to know. I hadn't even thought of that. So that is good to know. The vast majority of the trees you're planting are surviving.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Scooter. Appreciate your time. Look forward to talking to you next time.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Take care.